The Bellamy Hotel didn't just host celebrations, it curated them. Crystal chandeliers hung like frozen waterfalls above imported marble floors, casting fractured light across faces that cost more to maintain than most people earned in a year. Tonight, 300 of the city's most prominent families had gathered to witness the engagement of Richard Ashford III to the darling of Manhattan society, and the champagne alone could have funded a small country's healthcare system. Evelyn Hart moved through the crowd carrying a silver tray of champagne flutes, practically invisible. She'd perfected the art of disappearing in plain sight over the past 7 years. Shoulders slightly hunched, eyes down, movements efficient but unremarkable. The black service uniform helped. So did the fact that nobody at this party wanted to acknowledge her existence anyway. "More champagne, Mrs. Vanderbilt?" The elderly woman didn't even glance her direction, just plucked a glass from the tray with fingers heavy with emeralds. Evelyn moved on. Across the ballroom, her stepsister Claire sparkled like a championship trophy. The engagement wasn't hers, that honor belonged to their stepbrother Richard, but Claire had orchestrated every detail of tonight's spectacle with the precision of a military campaign. Ice sculptures, live orchestra, roses shipped from Ecuador. A celebration designed to announce to everyone who mattered that the Ashford family had not just arrived, they owned the arrival. Evelyn's father would have hated every second of it. But Thomas Hart had been dead for 7 years, and the family he'd trusted to care for his daughter had spent those years systematically erasing every trace of his legacy. "Evelyn? Evelyn?" The sharp whisper came from behind a marble column. Evelyn turned to find Marcus, the events manager, gesturing frantically. "Table 12 needs service, and for the love of stand up straight, you look like a question mark." She straightened, biting back the response that wanted to escape. Marcus wasn't cruel, just perpetually stressed and underpaid. Besides, she needed this job. The tips from events like this kept her studio apartment barely affordable, and her community college classes almost within reach. Table 12 sat near the terrace doors, prime real estate for guests who wanted to see and be seen. Evelyn recognized most of the faces. The Carmichaels, old money so old it had developed its own ecosystem. The Joes, new tech wealth desperately trying to buy legitimacy. And at the head of the table, Evelyn's step faltered. Her stepmother, Victoria Ashford, held court like a queen at a council meeting. Perfectly coiffed silver blonde hair. Dior gown that probably cost more than Evelyn's yearly salary. Smile sharp enough to gut a fish. And beside her, Claire. 26 years old and already a master manipulator, wrapped in blush pink silk that made her look innocent as a graduation photo. Evelyn had learned long ago not to make eye contact with either of them in public. It never ended well. She approached with her tray, refilling glasses with mechanical precision. Victoria didn't acknowledge her, neither did Claire. To them, Evelyn wasn't family. She was part of the furniture, useful for serving drinks at their parties, but not worth noticing otherwise. "The ceremony itself will be intimate," Victoria was saying to Mrs. Carmichael. "Just immediate family at the estate. We're thinking late September, when the gardens—" "Excuse me." The voice cut through the conversation like a blade through butter, quiet, but carrying weight that made people stop talking and pay attention. Evelyn looked up. The man standing at the edge of their table didn't belong in this crowd, despite wearing a suit that probably cost more than her car. He was too still, too watchful. While everyone else performed their wealth and status like trained dancers, this man simply existed in the space he occupied with the casual certainty of someone who'd never needed to prove anything to anyone. Dark hair, darker eyes. A face that might have been handsome if it wasn't so carefully expressionless. Lucien Varela. Evelyn recognized him from the newspapers, though the photos never quite captured the presence. He'd built a real estate empire from nothing, turned abandoned warehouses into luxury developments, and had a reputation for destroying anyone who got in his way. Business journals called him a visionary. Competitors called him ruthless. Nobody called him a friend. What the hell was he doing at Richard's engagement party? Victoria's smile didn't waver, but Evelyn caught the momentary calculation in her stepmother's eyes. "Mr. Varela? What an unexpected pleasure." "Mrs. Ashford." He didn't sit, didn't reach for the empty chair, just stood there, radiating quiet menace. "I need to speak with Evelyn." The entire table went silent. Evelyn's hand trembled slightly, champagne bottle tilting. She steadied it quickly, but not before a drop hit the white tablecloth. Nobody noticed. They were all staring at Lucien Varela like he'd just announced the building was on fire. "I'm sorry?" Victoria's voice had gone very soft. Dangerous soft. "Evelyn Hart." Lucien's gaze shifted, landing on Evelyn with the weight of a physical touch. "We need to talk, now." Every instinct Evelyn had developed over 7 years of surviving in this family screamed at her to refuse, to stay small, to not draw attention. But something in his expression stopped her. Not threat, not exactly. Warning. "I'm working," she managed. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "I can't just—" "Yes, you can." He pulled something from his jacket pocket, a business card, and held it out. Not to Victoria. To her. 5 minutes. The library on the second floor. This is not a request you want to ignore. Then he turned and walked away, leaving the card hovering in the air between them like a grenade with the pin pulled. Evelyn stared at it. Heavy cardstock, embossed lettering. Lucien Varela, Varela Development Corporation. And on the back, written in pen, "They're coming for you tonight. Library. Now." The champagne bottle nearly slipped from her grip. "Well," Victoria's laugh was crystalline and utterly false. "How bizarre. Evelyn, dear, do you have any idea what that was about?" Evelyn looked at her stepmother, really looked at her, and saw something she'd missed before. Victoria wasn't surprised. Confused, yes. Annoyed, absolutely. But not surprised. She knew something. "No idea," Evelyn lied. She set down the champagne bottle with trembling hands. I'll just see what he wants. Probably some mix-up with the catering. You'll do no such thing." Claire's voice carried the petulant edge of someone used to getting her way. "You're working. Marcus will have your head if you disappear mid-service. Then I'll deal with Marcus." Evelyn untied her apron, movements jerky with adrenaline she didn't understand yet. "Excuse me." She walked away before anyone could stop her, weaving through the crowd with her heart hammering against her ribs. The card felt like it was burning through her palm. "They're coming for you tonight." Who? Coming for what? The library occupied a quiet corner on the second floor, accessible through a side staircase most guests wouldn't notice. Evelyn had discovered it during her first event at the Bellamy, back when she still hoped someone from her old life might recognize her and remember who she used to be. Nobody ever did. The door was ajar. Warm light spilled into the hallway, along with the scent of old books and furniture polish. Evelyn pushed it open. Lucien Varela stood by the window, silhouetted against the city lights. He didn't turn when she entered, but his voice reached her clearly. "Close the door." She did, though every survival instinct told her this was a mistake. "Mr. Varela, I don't know how much do you know about your stepsister's business dealings?" The question hit her like cold water. "What?" "Claire Ashford." Now he turned, and the expression on his face made something in Evelyn's chest go tight. "She's been running a real estate fraud scheme for the past 18 months, property flipping with falsified inspections, forged permits, shell companies funneling money through offshore accounts. Very sophisticated, very illegal." Evelyn's mouth went dry. The FBI has been building a case. They're executing warrants tonight. Right now, actually." He checked his watch. Expensive, understated. "Your stepmother knows. That's why this party is happening. Visible alibis for the whole family while they clean up the evidence." "Then why are you telling me?" The words came out sharp, defensive. "What does this have to do with—" "Because every transaction, every forged document, every fraudulent transfer was signed with your name." The floor seemed to tilt. "No." Evelyn shook her head, backing toward the door. "No, that's not possible. I don't even work in real estate. I serve drinks at parties. I take online classes. I don't—" "Your signature, your social security number, your tax returns." Lucien's voice remained steady, factual, devastating. "Claire's been building this for years, Evelyn. Every piece of evidence points directly to you." The room was spinning now. Evelyn grabbed the back of a leather chair, knuckles white. "Why?" The word barely made it past her throat. "Why would she—" "Because you're disposable." He said it without cruelty, just stating a fact. "You're the stepdaughter nobody cares about. No allies, no resources, no credibility. The perfect fall guy." "I'll explain. I'll tell them—" "Tell them what?" That you had no idea someone was using your identity? That's what everyone says. The prosecution has emails with your address, contracts with your signature, bank records showing deposits into accounts in your name. He moved closer, and Evelyn realized for the first time how tall he was, how much space he occupied. You can't prove you didn't do this. They can prove you did. Then She couldn't finish the sentence. Going to prison. Yes. 10 to 15 years minimum. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Evelyn's knees gave out. She sank into the chair, mind racing through possibilities that all ended the same way. Victoria had the best lawyers. Claire had connections. And Evelyn had nothing except a studio apartment and student loan debt. Unless, Lucian said quietly. She looked up. Unless what? Unless you marry me. Tonight. For a moment, Evelyn thought she'd misheard. Then she realized she hadn't, and everything got worse. You're insane. I'm practical. He pulled out a phone, tapped the screen, then turned it toward her. A news article loaded. FBI raids target Manhattan real estate fraud ring. The timestamp read 37 minutes ago. They're already moving, Lucien de Tissasian continued. Warrants, arrests. Your stepfamily is downstairs right now celebrating because they think you're the one going down for this. And you will, unless you accept my offer. Why? Evelyn's voice cracked. Why would you help me? I'm nobody. You don't know me. What could you possibly? I need a wife. The bluntness of it shocked her into silence. Lucien pocketed his phone, expression unreadable. I'm finalizing a development deal. Very lucrative, very specific requirements. One of which is that the primary stakeholder be married, stable, respectable. I've delayed it as long as possible, but the investors won't wait any longer. So get married. You're rich, powerful. I don't do relationships. I don't do romance. And I don't trust anyone enough to give them that kind of access to my life. He paused. Except someone who literally has no other choice. Someone who needs protection as badly as I need legitimacy. Evelyn stared at him. This is insane. This is business. He checked his watch again. You have 3 minutes to decide. Marry me. Paperwork's already filed. Judge is waiting at my office. And I'll bury the evidence against you so deep the FBI will never find it. I'll give you protection, resources, and a life that doesn't involve prison. In exchange, you'll be my wife. Public appearances, social functions, nothing more. Nothing more, she repeated numbly. It's a business arrangement. You get safety. I get credibility. No love, no pretense, just survival. And if I say no, then you go back downstairs, finish your shift, and wait for the federal agents who are probably already in the lobby. His voice softened, just slightly. I'm not a good man, Evelyn. I'm not offering you a fairy tale, but I'm offering you a choice between a cage you know and a cage you don't. At least mine comes with better accommodations. Somewhere below them, the orchestra shifted into a waltz. Evelyn could hear laughter, the clink of glasses, the sound of 300 people celebrating while her entire life imploded. Her father's face flashed through her mind, the way he used to look at her when she was young, before the cancer, before Victoria, before everything turned to ash. You're stronger than you know, Evie. Don't ever let them make you small. But she'd let them anyway. For 7 years, she'd made herself invisible, hoping that if she just survived long enough, things would get better. They hadn't. They never would. Not unless she did something they'd never expect. Evelyn stood. Her legs shook, but they held. What happens after? She asked. After what? After the deal closes. After you don't need a respectable wife anymore. Lucien studied her for a long moment. We'll negotiate terms. Divorce. Settlement. Whatever you want. But first you have to survive tonight. 3 minutes, he'd said. Time was up. Evelyn looked at the door, at the escape route back to the life she knew, the one that was about to destroy her. Then she looked at Lucien Varela, the stranger with his devil's bargain and his emotionless eyes. Neither option was good, but one of them let her keep fighting. Okay, she whispered. Okay? Yes. Louder now, steadier. Yes, I'll marry you. Something flickered across his expression. Surprise, maybe, or relief. It vanished before she could name it. Then we need to go, now. He pulled out his phone, typing rapidly. Cars waiting downstairs will use the service entrance. I need my things, leave them. Everything in your apartment can be replaced. We don't have time. But the library door burst open. Victoria stood in the doorway, Claire beside her, and behind them, two men in dark suits with FBI badges clipped to their belts. There she is. Claire's voice dripped with false concern. Officers, that's Evelyn. We've been so worried. We had no idea she was involved in anything illegal. Our family is just devastated. Evelyn's heart stopped. Victoria's smile was poison wrapped in silk. Evelyn, dear, these gentlemen need to ask you some questions. About some property transactions? I'm sure it's all just a misunderstanding. The FBI agents moved into the room. Evelyn Hart, we need you to come with us. This was it, the trap closing. 7 years of carefully laid plans culminating in this single moment. Evelyn looked at Lucien. He looked back, expressionless, waiting. Choose, his eyes said. She chose. I'm Evelyn Varela, she said clearly, as of 20 minutes ago. Victoria's smile cracked. Lucien pulled a folded document from his inside pocket, handing it to the nearest agent. Marriage license, filed and registered with the city clerk's office. Time-stamped, legal. The agent scanned it, frowning. This says that she's my wife, which means any questions you have go through my lawyers. Gordon, Mitchell, and Associates. I believe you know them. He did. Everyone knew them. They were the legal equivalent of a nuclear weapon. Victoria's face had gone white. That's not possible. You can't. I can. I did. Lucien's voice stayed level, but something dangerous crept into his tone. And if you or your daughter attempt to implicate my wife in any criminal activity, I'll bury you both so deep you'll need archaeological equipment to find daylight. Are we clear? You can't threaten. That wasn't a threat, Mrs. Ashford. That was a statement of fact. He turned to the agents. Gentlemen, unless you have a warrant specifically naming Evelyn Varela, we're leaving. They didn't. Evelyn could see it in their faces, the calculations, the hierarchy of targets, the decision tree that led to backing down when the opponent had bigger guns. Claire was still their case. Victoria was still their target. Evelyn, newly married to one of the most powerful men in the city, had just become more trouble than she was worth. For now. We'll be in touch, one of the agents said finally. I'm sure you will. Lucien placed a hand on Evelyn's lower back. Not possessive, just guiding. Come on, we're done here. They walked past Victoria and Claire, past the FBI agents, past the entire life Evelyn had been drowning in for 7 years. Claire's voice followed them down the hallway. This doesn't change anything. You're still nobody, Evelyn. You're still... Lucien stopped walking. He didn't turn around, didn't raise his voice, just spoke clearly enough for everyone to hear. She's my wife, which makes her somebody you can't touch. Remember that. Then they were moving again, down the service stairs, through the kitchen where staff barely glanced up from their work, out into the cold night air where a black car waited at the curb. A driver opened the door. Evelyn slid inside, the leather seats cold against her skin. Lucien followed, and the door closed, sealing them in quiet darkness. The car pulled away from the Bellamy Hotel, from the party, from everything Evelyn had known. She stared at her hands. They were shaking. Breathe, Lucien said quietly. She tried. It didn't quite work. What just happened? The words came out broken. What did I just... You survived. He was looking out the window, watching the city lights blur past. That's all that matters tonight. I don't even know you. No. I just married a complete stranger. Yes. This is insane. Probably. He finally looked at her, and for the first time something almost human showed in his expression. Not kindness, not exactly, but understanding. For what it's worth, you made the right choice. Prison would have destroyed you. At least this way you have options. Options? Evelyn laughed, high and sharp. I have a husband I met 30 minutes ago and a family that just tried to send me to federal prison. Those are my options? Better than the alternative. She couldn't argue with that. The car turned onto a quieter street, buildings rising like mountains on either side. Evelyn recognized the neighborhood, Tribeca, where apartments cost more per month than most people made in a year. Where are we going? Home. My penthouse. You'll stay there. I have an apartment. Not anymore. Your stepfamily knows where you live. So does the FBI. You need to disappear for a while. Let things settle. I have classes, a job. I can't just... Your job is serving drinks at parties where your family humiliates you. Your classes are online. Both can be handled from the penthouse. His tone left no room for argument. This is not a negotiation, Evelyn. You're in danger, real danger. Until I neutralize the threat, you stay where I can protect you. Protect me. She turned to face him fully. Why? You got what you needed. The marriage license is filed. Your deal is safe. Why do you care what happens to me now? Lucien was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was careful, measured. Because you're mine now, and I protect what's mine. The words should have felt possessive, threatening. Instead, after 7 years of being invisible, of being nothing, of being disposable, they felt like the first solid ground she'd stood on since her father died. The car pulled up to a glass tower that seemed to touch the clouds. The driver opened the door. Lucien stepped out, then offered his hand. Evelyn looked at it. Looked at him. Looked at the building that would be her cage or her sanctuary, depending on what happened next. Then she took his hand and stepped into her new life. Whatever that meant. The lobby was all marble and modern art, the kind of space that whispered money in 12 different languages. A doorman nodded to Lucien without speaking. The elevator required a key card to access the penthouse floors. They rode up in silence. Evelyn watched the numbers climb. 30, 40, 50. When they finally stopped, she'd lost count. The elevator opened directly into the apartment. It wasn't what she expected. Somehow she'd imagined something cold, minimalist, sterile. But the space that spread before her was warm, exposed brick, hardwood floors, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Bookshelves lined one wall. A kitchen that looked actually used, not just decorative. It looked like someone lived here. Your room is down the hall, Lucien said, shrugging out of his jacket. Second door. Bathroom's attached. I'll have your things sent over tomorrow. I thought you said to leave everything. I said leave them tonight. I didn't say abandon them. He loosened his tie, suddenly looking tired. There's food in the kitchen if you're hungry. Otherwise, get some sleep. We have a lot to figure out in the morning. Evelyn stood in the middle of this stranger's home, her home now, apparently, and felt the full weight of the night crash over her. 3 hours ago, she'd been serving champagne. Now she was married. I don't understand any of this, she said quietly. Lucien paused halfway to what she assumed was his bedroom. What part? All of it. Why you helped me. Why you need this marriage. Why you're being... She struggled for the word. Not cruel. Would you prefer cruel? I prefer honest. He studied her for a moment, and she got the sense he was deciding how much truth she could handle. I told you, he said finally, I needed a wife. Someone without expectations. Someone who wouldn't try to turn this into something it's not. But why me? You could have hired someone, paid them, made it clean, because hired help can be bought by someone else. But you? His smile was thin, humorless. You have nowhere else to go, no family to run back to, no leverage to use against me. You're trapped here by necessity, which makes you the most trustworthy person I could have chosen. The brutal honesty of it stole her breath. So I'm just convenient. You're safe, he corrected. There's a difference. Evelyn wanted to argue, wanted to rage against the casual way he just outlined how thoroughly alone she was in the world. But he was right, and somehow that hurt worse than anything else tonight. Get some sleep, Lucien said again, softer this time. Tomorrow, we'll talk about rules, expectations, how this works. He disappeared into his room, leaving Evelyn alone in the penthouse. She found her way to the second door down the hall. The room beyond was bigger than her entire studio apartment. King bed, desk, another wall of windows. Everything clean and impersonal, like a very expensive hotel. Evelyn sat on the edge of the bed, still in her server's uniform, and tried to process what her life had become. Her phone buzzed. 13 missed calls from Victoria. 27 texts from Claire, progressing from confusion to rage to threats. Evelyn turned it off and threw it in a drawer. She lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling, and wondered if she'd just escaped one prison by walking into another. Outside the windows, the city glittered like broken glass. And somewhere in the night, federal agents were probably tearing apart Claire's life the way Claire had planned to tear apart hers. Evelyn should have felt vindicated, triumphant, something. Instead, she just felt numb. She'd survived tonight. Lucien was right about that. But survival wasn't living, and she had no idea how to get from one to the other. Sleep, when it finally came, was thin and restless. Tomorrow would bring answers, or more questions. At this point, Evelyn wasn't sure which would be worse. Morning came too fast and too bright. Evelyn woke to sunlight slicing through unfamiliar windows, her body stiff from sleeping in her work clothes. For 3 disoriented seconds, she thought she'd fallen asleep at the library during a study session. Then memory crashed back like a physical blow. The hotel. The FBI. Lucien Varela. The marriage. She sat up too quickly, head spinning. The bedroom looked exactly as sterile in daylight as it had at midnight. Expensive furniture arranged with the precision of a showroom, nothing personal anywhere. A prison decorated by an interior designer. Her phone was still in the drawer where she'd thrown it. Evelyn pulled it out, powered it on, and immediately regretted the decision. 63 missed calls, over 100 texts, 3 voicemails from numbers she didn't recognize, and 1 notification that made her stomach drop. A news alert. Ashford family under federal investigation. Real estate fraud scheme uncovered. Her hands shook as she opened the article. Photos of Victoria and Claire, their faces carefully neutral as they were escorted from their townhouse by FBI agents. Details about shell companies, falsified documents, millions in fraudulent transactions. And buried in the 4th paragraph, a single sentence that made Evelyn's blood run cold. Authorities initially suspected family member Evelyn Hart, but have since shifted focus following new evidence in Ms. Hart's recent marriage to developer Lucien Varela. She'd escaped, barely, by the thinnest possible margin. A knock on the door made her jump. "You decent?" Lucien's voice muffled through the wood. "I'm dressed. Still in yesterday's uniform, wrinkled and smelling like spilled champagne and panic sweat." He opened the door carrying a garment bag and a coffee mug. "Bathroom's stocked. Clothes should fit. I had my assistant pull sizes from your driver's license. Coffee's black. If you need something else, kitchen's fair game." He set both items on the desk and turned to leave. "Wait." Evelyn's voice came out rougher than intended. "We need to talk. After you've showered, eaten, woken up properly." His tone was matter-of-fact, businesslike. "I have calls starting in an hour. We'll talk then." Lucien. "1 hour, Evelyn. Everything will still be a disaster in 60 minutes. Trust me." He left before she could argue. The shower helped. So did the clothes. Dark jeans that actually fit. A soft sweater that probably cost more than her weekly paycheck used to. The coffee was too strong but did its job, clearing the fog from her brain enough to think. She found Lucien in the kitchen, laptop open on the counter, phone pressed to his ear. He held up one finger. "Wait," and continued his conversation. "I don't care what the city says. The permits were approved. If they're trying to reverse that decision now, they'll need a better reason than political pressure." A pause. "Then tell Councilman Reeves he can explain to his constituents why he's blocking affordable housing development. See how that plays in the media." He ended the call, set the phone down, and looked at Evelyn properly for the first time in daylight. "Better?" "No, but cleaner." She pulled out a bar stool, sat. "I saw the news." "Good. Means you understand the situation you're in." "Which is what exactly?" "Because right now, all I know is that I'm married to someone I don't know, living in his apartment, and my entire family is under federal investigation for crimes they tried to pin on me." "That's a fairly accurate summary." Lucien closed his laptop, gave her his full attention. "What else do you need to know?" Everything, Evelyn wanted to say. Instead, she forced herself to focus. "The deal you mentioned, the one that required a wife. What is it?" "Development project, Hudson Yards area. Mixed-use complex, residential, commercial, community spaces. The primary investors are a consortium of family trusts, very traditional, very particular about who they do business with. And they require you to be married. They require their partners to demonstrate stability and long-term commitment. In their world, that means marriage." His expression remained neutral. "It's archaic, discriminatory. Probably actionable under half a dozen laws, but they have the money and the land access, so I play by their rules. Evelyn studied him. That's it? That's the only reason? What other reason would there be? I don't know. That's what scares me. She wrapped both hands around her coffee mug, anchoring herself. You said this was business. Fine. I understand business. But business has terms, contracts, clear expectations. So what are ours? Lucian was quiet for a moment, and she got the sense he was reassessing her, realizing she wasn't going to just accept vague promises and hope for the best. Fair question. He pulled out his phone, tapped a few times, then slid it across the counter. Read this. It was a document, dense legal language that made Evelyn's eyes cross, but the broad strokes were clear enough. A marriage contract that looked more like a corporate merger agreement. Separate finances, no conjugal expectations, public appearances as required, termination clause after 18 months or upon completion of the development deal, whichever came first, and a settlement clause that made Evelyn's breath catch. $5 million? Upon dissolution of the marriage, assuming you fulfill the terms, Lucian retrieved his phone. You'll sign a prenup, obviously, but the settlement is guaranteed regardless. Think of it as payment for services rendered. $5 million. Enough to finish school, start over, build something that belonged only to her, enough to disappear if she needed to. This seems excessive. It's insurance, for both of us. Lucian's voice stayed even. You get financial security. I get a partner who won't try to leverage this situation for more than we agreed to. Clean transaction. Except I didn't agree to anything yet. You made that decision for me last night. No, I gave you an option. You chose to take it. I chose prison or marriage. That's not a choice. That's coercion. Call it what you want. For the first time, something sharp entered his tone. You're here, alive, free. Your stepfamily is the one facing charges. If you want to feel victimized by those circumstances, go ahead. But don't pretend you didn't get exactly what you needed when you needed it. The words hit harder because they were true. Evelyn wanted to be angry, wanted to rage against the casual way he'd upended her entire existence. But anger required energy she didn't have, and the alternative to this penthouse was a jail cell. What happens now? She asked instead. Now we make this look real. Lucien pulled up something else on his phone. The marriage announcement goes public today. By tonight, every society page and business journal will be running the story. We need to control the narrative. How? Dinner, tonight, Il Gabbiano. Very public, very visible. We show up together, newly married, completely normal. There's nothing normal about this. They don't know that. He met her eyes. Here's what people will see. A powerful man who married quickly and quietly. A woman from a prominent family. A romance that moved fast because when you know, you know. Standard wealthy people nonsense. And my stepfamily will be too busy dealing with federal prosecutors to cause problems. For now. He paused. Eventually they'll try something. Victoria doesn't surrender easily, but by then you'll be too protected to touch. Protected how? Instead of answering directly, Lucien stood and walked to the windows. See that building? The one with the green roof? Evelyn joined him. The building in question was maybe 6 blocks away, distinctive against the skyline. That's mine. Or it will be once the deal closes. 42 floors, retail on the ground level, offices in the middle, residential on top, and the entire 8th floor dedicated to community services. Community services, legal aid, medical clinic, job training programs, resources for people who need help and can't afford the usual channels. His voice remained flat, factual, but something underneath it suggested this mattered more than he wanted to admit. The investors don't care about that part. They care about the profit margins on the residential units and the tax benefits from the charitable components. But I care. That's why this deal can't fall apart. Evelyn looked at him, really looked at him, and saw something she hadn't expected. Purpose. The kind that didn't come from profit margins or business victories. Why? She asked quietly. Why what? Why do you care about legal aid and medical clinics? You're a developer. You build expensive apartments for rich people. This doesn't fit. Lucien's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Everyone has reasons for what they do. Those are mine. That's all you need to know. It wasn't, but Evelyn recognized a wall when she hit one. She filed the question away for later. Okay, dinner tonight, public appearance. What else? You'll need to move in here permanently, not just temporarily. I already am here. I mean officially. Change your address, forward your mail, make it look like an actual marriage, not a business arrangement with separate residences. The reality of that settled over Evelyn like a weight. This wasn't just a piece of paper. This was her life now, at least for the next 18 months. Fine. What about my classes? Keep taking them. Online's fine. If you need to be on campus, security goes with you. Security? You're married to me now. That comes with complications. He said it like he was discussing weather. Marcus handles it. Former Secret Service. Very good at being invisible until he needs not to be. I don't need a bodyguard. Yes, you do. Your family just got arrested for federal crimes they plan to blame on you. You think they're going to quietly accept that you escaped? Or that I'm the reason why? Lucian's voice went hard. Someone's going to come looking, Evelyn. Could be Victoria hiring lawyers to flip the case. Could be Claire trying to cut a deal by offering you up. Could be something worse. Until this settles, you don't go anywhere without protection. The thought hadn't occurred to her. It should have, but the past 12 hours had been too surreal to process properly. How long? She asked. However long it takes. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have. He checked his watch. I need to take these calls. Dinner reservations at 8. Wear something nice. There's more in the closet. Marcus will drive us. I don't have anything nice. Yes, you do. Check the closet. Evelyn walked back to the bedroom, pulled open the closet door, and stopped. A dozen dresses hung in neat rows. Designer labels she recognized from the stores she used to window shop past on her way to work. Shoes lined up below. A jewelry box on the shelf that probably contained pieces worth more than her student loans. Her hand shook as she touched a midnight blue dress, silk that felt like water. This was real. All of it. She'd actually married a stranger, actually agreed to play this role, actually signed up for a life that looked nothing like the one she'd planned. The phone in her pocket buzzed. Another text from Claire. This doesn't end just because you found some rich asshole to hide behind. You're still guilty. Everyone will know what you are. Evelyn deleted it without responding. Then she pulled out the blue dress and tried not to think about what came next. The day passed in a blur of phone calls she wasn't part of, and silence that felt louder than conversation. Lucien worked from the dining table, laptop and documents spread everywhere, occasionally disappearing into his office for video conferences. Evelyn tried to focus on classwork, but kept reading the same paragraph over and over without retaining anything. At 7:30, she emerged from the bedroom wearing the blue dress and shoes that pinched slightly. Her reflection in the hallway mirror looked like a stranger, someone polished and put together, not the invisible server from last night. Lucien appeared from his office wearing a different suit, dark gray that probably cost more than 3 months of her old rent. He stopped when he saw her, and something flickered across his expression too fast to read. "You clean up well," he said finally. "Thanks, I think." "It's a compliment. Take it." A man Evelyn didn't recognize waited by the elevator, mid-40s, built like he could bend steel, with the kind of alertness that suggested he missed nothing. He nodded politely. "Mrs. Varela, I'm Marcus." The name still didn't feel real. "Evelyn's fine." "No, it's not." Lucian's voice was quiet but firm. "In public, you're Mrs. Varela. Get used to it." The elevator ride down was silent. Marcus drove them in a black SUV with windows tinted dark enough to be illegal. The city slid past outside, familiar streets that suddenly felt like foreign territory. Il Gabbiano occupied a corner in the West Village, the kind of restaurant that didn't advertise because everyone who mattered already knew about it. Paparazzi lingered outside, not many, but enough to notice when Lucian's car pulled up. "Smile," he murmured as Marcus opened the door. "We're newlyweds. Act like it." Evelyn stepped out into camera flashes and shouted questions she couldn't process. Lucien's hand found the small of her back, warm and steadying, guiding her toward the entrance. She tried to smile. It probably looked terrified. Inside, the noise cut off like someone had thrown a switch. Soft lighting, white tablecloths, the quiet murmur of people who never had to raise their voices to be heard. The maitre d' greeted them by name. "Mr. Varela, Mrs. Varela. Congratulations on your marriage. Right this way." Their table was tucked in a corner, private but visible. Evelyn slid into her seat, hyper-aware of eyes tracking their movement. The restaurant wasn't full, but every person there knew exactly who Lucian was. And now they were trying to figure out who she was. "Relax," Lucian said quietly, opening his menu. "You look like you're facing a firing squad." "I feel like I am." "They're just curious. Give them something boring to see. We order, we eat, we leave. Nothing dramatic." "Your definition of boring is broken." The corner of his mouth twitched, almost a smile. "Probably." A waiter appeared with wine, poured without asking. Evelyn took a sip and nearly choked. Whatever it was cost more per glass than she used to spend on groceries in a week. "So," she said, keeping her voice low, "what do newly married people talk about at dinner? In our case, the contract you still haven't signed." "Romantic." "I don't do romance. We established that." "Right, business arrangement. I remember." Evelyn set down her glass. "What happens if I don't sign it?" "Then you're married to me without any protection. No settlement, no guaranteed termination date. Just the legal reality of being my wife until one of us files for divorce." He met her eyes. "The contract protects you, Evelyn. Without it, you're completely vulnerable. And with it, I'm just partially vulnerable? Welcome to marriage." Despite everything, Evelyn almost laughed. "You're terrible at this." "At what?" "Pretending to be human." This time he definitely smiled. Barely. "I've been told that before." They ordered food Evelyn couldn't pronounce. Conversation drifted through safe topics. Nothing real, nothing that mattered, just the verbal equivalent of wallpaper. But underneath it, Evelyn felt the weight of every eye in the restaurant. The whispers, the speculation. By tomorrow, her face would be everywhere. The mystery woman who'd somehow landed Lucian Varela. People would dig into her background, find her father's death, her stepfamily's arrest, the connection between her and the fraud case. "They're going to figure it out," she said quietly. "Figure out what?" "That this isn't real. That you married me to save me from prison. That this whole thing is just—" "Let them speculate." Lucien's voice stayed level. "Speculation isn't proof. And the official story is simple. We met, we connected, we moved fast. People do it all the time. Not people like you. You don't know what people like me do. I know you don't fall in love and get married overnight. Neither do most people. But they pretend they did. We're just doing the same thing with more honest motivations." He leaned back slightly. "Besides, the fraud case actually helps our cover. You needed protection from a corrupt family. I provided it. Very chivalrous, very romantic, the kind of story society loves." Evelyn wanted to argue, but he was right. The narrative practically wrote itself. Powerful man rescues damsel in distress. Tale as old as time, packaged for the tabloids. The food arrived. Evelyn ate without tasting, too aware of the performance they were giving. Across the restaurant, she caught sight of a woman openly photographing them with her phone. "Ignore it," Lucian said. "Easy for you to say. You're used to this." "You'll get used to it too." "I don't want to get used to it." "Then you married the wrong person." The bluntness stung, but Evelyn couldn't argue. She had married the wrong person, or rather, she'd married exactly the person she needed in that moment, regardless of whether he was right for anything beyond survival. They finished dinner. Lucian paid with a black card that had no visible credit limit. Outside, the paparazzi had multiplied. Marcus materialized from somewhere, creating a barrier between them and the cameras. "Mrs. Varela, how did you meet?" "Lucienne, is it true her family's under investigation?" "How long have you been together?" Evelyn kept her head down, letting Lucian guide her to the car. But before Marcus could open the door, Lucian stopped, turned to face the cameras. "My wife and I appreciate your interest," he said, voice carrying clearly. "But we'd like to keep our private life private, thank you." Then he opened the door himself, waited for Evelyn to get in, and slid in beside her. The car pulled away, leaving the shouted questions behind. "That was unexpected," Evelyn said. "What was?" "You talking to them. I thought you didn't do public statements." "I don't. But they needed something, or they'd have camped outside the building all night. Give them a quote. They go home happy." He loosened his tie. "Besides, calling you my wife in public makes it harder for anyone to challenge the validity of the marriage." "Of course. Strategy, not sentiment." Evelyn looked out the window, watching the city blur past, and wondered how long she could live like this. Everything calculated, every word measured, every gesture part of a performance. 18 months suddenly felt like a lifetime. Back at the penthouse, Evelyn kicked off the painful shoes and headed straight for the bedroom. But Lucien's voice stopped her. "We're not done." She turned. He was standing by the dining table, pulling documents from his briefcase. "The contract, we need to finalize it tonight." "Why tonight?" "Because tomorrow, my lawyers present the marriage certificate to the investors. If there's any problem with the terms, I need to know now." Evelyn walked back slowly, exhaustion pulling at her bones. "What's left to negotiate?" "Nothing. You just need to sign." He spread the documents across the table. Multiple copies, each page flagged with colored tabs. Evelyn scanned the text, her business law class suddenly feeling inadequate for this situation. "I should have a lawyer look at this." "You should. I can recommend someone." "Someone who works for you. Someone who's good at their job and won't waste your time." Lucien pulled out a chair. "But if you want to find your own counsel, go ahead. Just understand that delays this process. And time is something we don't have much of." Evelyn sat, reading more carefully this time. The language was dense, but clear. Separate property. No commingling of assets. Public appearances as required. Minimum twice monthly. Private life remains private. No conjugal expectations. No cohabitation beyond appearance of shared residence. And that settlement. $5 million guaranteed, payable upon dissolution. "What's the catch?" she asked. "No catch." "There's always a catch." Lucien was quiet for a moment. "The catch is you have to actually fulfill the terms. Show up, play the role. Don't embarrass me publicly or create scandal that damages the deal. Do that, and the money's yours." "And if I don't?" "Then the settlement drops to whatever a judge decides in divorce court. Probably nothing, since you brought no assets into the marriage." He slid a pen across the table. "Your choice." Evelyn picked up the pen, weighing it in her hand. This was real. Once she signed, there was no going back. No pretending this was temporary insanity she could wake up from. But going back meant what? Her studio apartment? Her serving job? The FBI investigation that still had her name in the files? She'd chosen this path last night. Now she just had to keep walking it. Evelyn signed. Lucien witnessed each signature, his own handwriting sharp and precise. When they finished, he gathered the documents, slid one copy toward her. "Keep this somewhere safe." Where would be safe? Safe deposit box, lawyer's office, somewhere your family can't access if they come looking. The casual way he mentioned that possibility made Evelyn's stomach turn. "You really think they'll try something?" "I think desperate people do desperate things. And Victoria just lost everything she spent decades building." Lucien returned the other copies to his briefcase. "She'll blame you, blame me, blame anyone except herself. And when blame turns into action, I want you protected. Hence Marcus. Hence Marcus. Hence this contract. Hence all of it." He looked at her directly. "I wasn't lying last night, Evelyn. You're mine now. And I protect what's mine. That's not romance. That's just how I operate." The words should have felt cold, possessive, wrong. Instead, they felt like the first honest thing anyone had said to her in years. Evelyn stood, contract in hand. "I'm going to bed. Today was—" She couldn't find words that fit. "Overwhelming. I know." Lucien's voice softened, just slightly. "It gets easier." "Does it?" "No, but you get better at pretending it does." She left him there, surrounded by documents and the quiet machinery of power, and retreated to the bedroom that still didn't feel like hers. Sleep came easier than expected, probably from exhaustion. But sometime deep in the night, Evelyn woke to voices in the living room. Lucien's low and tense, someone else responding. She cracked the bedroom door. Marcus stood in the living room, tablet in hand, showing Lucien something on the screen. Neither man looked happy. "Confirmed," Marcus was saying. "Victoria hired Camden Associates. They're already digging." "How deep?" "Deep enough to be a problem. They've got investigators looking into the timeline, marriage license filing, your connection to her." A pause. "They're building a case that the marriage is fraudulent." Evelyn's breath caught. Lucien's expression remained unreadable. Can they prove it? Not with what they have now. But if they find the right inconsistencies, separate bedrooms, no relationship history, the timing with the FBI investigation, they might convince a judge to look closer. Then we don't give them inconsistencies. Lucian's voice went hard. Starting tomorrow, we're a married couple in every visible way. Shared bedroom, public affection, whatever it takes to sell this. That's going to require cooperation from her. She'll cooperate. She doesn't have a choice. Evelyn stepped back from the door, heart hammering. Shared bedroom, public affection, whatever it takes. This was spiraling beyond anything she'd agreed to. She climbed back into bed, pulled the covers up, and stared at the ceiling. Tomorrow, everything would change again, and she had no idea how much more of herself she'd have to give up to keep this charade alive. Outside, the city hummed with late-night traffic and distant sirens. Inside, Evelyn lay awake and wondered what she'd really signed when she put her name on that contract. Morning would bring answers. She wasn't sure she wanted them. The conversation Evelyn overheard played on repeat in her head through what remained of the night. By the time gray dawn crept through the windows, she'd convinced herself she'd imagined it. Misheard, blown things out of proportion because exhaustion made everything feel worse than it was. Then she walked into the kitchen and found Lucian sitting at the counter with 2 cups of coffee and an expression that said the conversation had been very real. "We need to talk," he said. Evelyn poured herself coffee, added cream she didn't want just to have something to do with her hands. "I heard you last night, with Marcus. I know, you're not as quiet as you think." No accusation in his voice, just fact. "Which means you know what's coming. Victoria's lawyers are trying to prove the marriage is fake. Not just trying, actively building a case." He slid a tablet across the counter. "This showed up an hour ago." The screen displayed a legal filing. Dense language that took Evelyn 3 tries to parse, but the gist was clear enough. Victoria's legal team had petitioned for an investigation into the validity of the marriage, citing suspicious timing and potential fraud. "Can they do this?" Evelyn asked. "They can try. Whether they succeed depends on what evidence they find." Lucian took a long drink of coffee. "Which is why we need to make sure there's no evidence to find. You said shared bedroom, public affection. What does that actually mean?" "It means we stop living like strangers who happen to share an address." He met her eyes, and she saw something there she hadn't before. Not quite apology, but acknowledgement that this was harder than the contract had implied. "Your things move into my room today. We're seen together more often. When we're in public, we act like a couple. Nothing extreme, just enough to make the story believable. And in private? In private, we do whatever works. But the bedroom has to look shared. The staff here talk. Building management talks. If Victoria's investigators start asking questions, I need every answer to support our story." Evelyn set down her cup before her shaking hands could spill it. "This is more than I agreed to." "I know." The contract said separate lives, no expectations beyond appearances. And circumstances changed. Victoria changed them when she hired investigators. His voice stayed level, reasonable, which somehow made it worse. "I'm not asking you to sleep with me, Evelyn. I'm asking you to share a bedroom and pretend we're married when anyone might be watching. That's it." "That's not it. That's my privacy, my space. The one thing I had that was just mine." "You want privacy? I'll give you privacy. But not if it costs us both everything." Lucian stood, carried his cup to the sink. "Move your things by noon. I have meetings until 3. When I get back, we're going to my mother's house for dinner." That stopped Evelyn cold. "Your mother? She insists on meeting you. Apparently marriage announcements warrant family introductions, even when the family wasn't invited to the ceremony." He said it with the kind of resignation that suggested this wasn't a fight he'd won. "Be ready at 5. Wear something conservative. She's traditional." He left before Evelyn could form a response. She stood alone in the kitchen, coffee going cold in her hand, and tried to figure out how her life had become something she no longer recognized. 3 days ago, she'd been invisible. Now she was being investigated by lawyers, moving into a stranger's bedroom, and meeting his mother. The absurdity of it would have been funny if it wasn't so terrifying. Marcus appeared around 10, professional and polite as always, carrying boxes. "Mrs. Varela, I'll help you move your things." "I can do it myself." "I'm sure you can. But Mr. Varela asked me to assist, so I'm assisting. He set the boxes down. If it helps, the bedroom's larger than most studio apartments. You won't feel cramped. That wasn't the point, but Evelyn didn't have the energy to argue. She packed what little she'd unpacked: clothes, toiletries, the laptop she used for school. Everything fit in 2 boxes and a garment bag. 7 years of life condensed into containers that barely filled a closet. Marcus carried everything down the hall like he was handling explosives. The master bedroom door stood open. Evelyn had glimpsed it before but never entered. Now she stepped inside and understood why Marcus had mentioned the size. The room was huge. King bed that looked custom-made. Windows overlooking the city, a sitting area with chairs and a reading lamp. 2 doors leading to what she assumed were bathroom and closet. And absolutely nothing personal anywhere. No photos, no books on the nightstand, no clutter. It looked like a hotel suite decorated by someone who'd never actually lived anywhere. "Closet's through there," Marcus said, nodding to the left door. "Mr. Varela uses about 1/3 of it. Rest is yours." Evelyn opened the door and stopped. The closet was bigger than her old bedroom. Designer suits lined one side, organized by color. Shirts. Shoes. Everything precise and ordered. The other 2/3 stood empty, waiting. She started hanging dresses, trying not to think about what this meant. Trying not to calculate how many hours she'd spend in this space, sharing it with someone who felt more like a business partner than a husband. Marcus left once everything was moved. Evelyn stood in the middle of the bedroom, her bedroom now, apparently, and felt the walls closing in despite the square footage. Her phone buzzed. A text from a number she didn't recognize. "Enjoy playing house while it lasts. The truth always comes out. See Claire." Of course, probably using a burner phone since her regular one was evidence in a federal case. Evelyn deleted the message and turned off her phone. At 4:30, she emerged wearing a navy dress that hit below the knee and made her look like she was interviewing for a job at a law firm. Lucien was already by the door, keys in hand, wearing slacks and a sweater that probably cost more than her entire outfit. "Ready?" he asked. "No, but I'm dressed, so that'll have to be enough." The drive took 40 minutes, heading north into Westchester, where the houses got larger and the properties got gates. Lucien drove himself this time, no Marcus, just the 2 of them in a car that cost more than most people's houses. "Tell me about your mother," Evelyn said, breaking the silence. "She's traditional, values family, thinks I work too much." He navigated turns without GPS, clearly familiar with the route. "She's going to ask you questions, personal questions. Just answer honestly." "Honestly? About what? How we actually met? How this is all fake? Honestly about yourself, your background, what you want." He glanced at her briefly. "The marriage might be strategy, but you're still a real person. She'll respect that. And if she doesn't believe we're actually in love, she won't. She's too smart for that." His mouth quirked. "But she'll play along because it makes me happy, or at least less miserable than usual." The house that appeared at the end of a tree-lined drive wasn't a mansion. It was too tasteful for that, but it was substantial. Old money architecture, maintained perfectly, surrounded by gardens that probably required a full-time staff. A woman waited on the front steps. Late 60s, silver hair pulled back, wearing slacks and a cardigan that looked cashmere. She had Lucien's eyes, dark and assessing, but her face held warmth his never did. "Lucien." She embraced him briefly, then turned to Evelyn. "And you must be Evelyn. I'm Diana. Welcome." Her handshake was firm. Her smile seemed genuine. Evelyn didn't trust it. "Thank you for having me, Mrs. Varela. Diana, please, come in. Dinner's almost ready." The interior matched the exterior. Comfortable wealth. Nothing ostentatious. Family photos lined the hallway. Evelyn caught glimpses of a younger Lucien, smiling in a way she'd never seen on his adult face. Diana led them to a dining room where the table was set for 3. "I hope you like chicken. Lucien mentioned you didn't have dietary restrictions, but I should have asked directly. Chicken's perfect." Evelyn sat where Diana indicated, hyper-aware of Lucien taking the seat beside her. Close enough to touch. Playing the role. Diana brought out food that smelled incredible. Roasted chicken, vegetables, homemade bread. Nothing fancy, just well prepared. They served themselves family style, and the normalcy of it made Evelyn's chest ache. "So," Diana said once they'd started eating, "tell me how you 2 met. Lucien was frustratingly vague on the phone. Evelyn looked at Lucien. He looked back, expression neutral. Your story to tell. At an event, Evelyn said carefully. A party. I was working, he was attending. We started talking. Love at first sight? More like recognition at first sight. The words came easier than expected. I think we both saw something in each other that made sense, even when nothing else did. It wasn't quite a lie. She had seen something in Lucien that night, safety maybe, or just the opposite of everything her stepfamily represented. Diana studied her over her wine glass. And your family? Lucien mentioned they were dealing with some legal troubles. My stepfamily, Evelyn corrected quietly. My father died 7 years ago. The people who took me in after aren't really family. Not in any way that matters. I'm sorry. That must be difficult. It was. But it's better now. Evelyn looked at Lucien, forcing herself to sell the story. Marrying Lucien meant I didn't have to deal with them anymore. Clean break? Rather sudden, though, wasn't it? The marriage? There it was. The question underneath the question. When you know, you know. Lucien's voice was smooth, practiced. I've spent years building a business, making calculated decisions, being careful. He reached over, took Evelyn's hand. His skin was warm, the gesture natural enough to be convincing. Meeting Evelyn was the first impulsive thing I've done in a decade. Best decision I ever made. Diana's eyes softened. I'm glad. You've been alone too long. The rest of dinner passed in easier conversation. Diana asking about Evelyn's classes, her plans, what she thought of the city. Normal questions that felt surreal given the circumstances. Evelyn answered as honestly as she could, editing out the parts that would shatter the illusion. After dinner, Diana walked them to the door. She hugged Lucien again, then surprised Evelyn by embracing her too. Take care of him, Diana whispered. He pretends he doesn't need anyone, but he does. Evelyn didn't know what to say to that, so she just nodded. In the car heading back, neither of them spoke for the first 10 minutes. Finally, Evelyn broke the silence. She's nice. She is. Does she know? About the deal? The arrangement? She suspects, but she won't ask directly. That's not how she operates. Lucien's hands tightened on the steering wheel. She lost my father 15 years ago. Cancer. Since then, she's been waiting for me to find someone. Anyone. Even if it's not real, she'll take it. That's sad. That's love. Wanting someone to be happy, even when you know they're lying about it. The words hung between them, heavy with something Evelyn couldn't name. They got back to the penthouse around 9. Evelyn headed straight for the bedroom, their bedroom now, and stopped in the doorway. Her things had been integrated. Dresses hanging beside suits, shoes lined up next to his, toiletries in the bathroom, like she'd always been there. Lucien came up behind her. I'll take the couch tonight. Give you space to adjust. The contract says the bedroom has to look shared. Doesn't say we both have to sleep in it every night. He grabbed a pillow from the bed. Just in case anyone asks, we had an argument. Newlywed stuff. Totally normal. Lucien, he paused. Thank you for tonight. Your mother, you didn't have to. Yes, I did. This works better if my family believes it. He headed for the door. Get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be complicated. Why? Because your stepfamily's preliminary hearing is at 10, and we're going to be there. Evelyn's stomach dropped. What? You want them to think you're scared? Hiding? That plays into their narrative. His voice went hard. Tomorrow, we show up. Together. Let them see exactly what they're up against. He left before she could argue. Evelyn stood alone in the bedroom that wasn't quite hers, looking at the bed that was too big, and tried to imagine facing Victoria and Claire in a courtroom. Sleep took hours to find. The courthouse was downtown, concrete and glass, the kind of building designed to intimidate. Evelyn had only been inside once before, years ago, for a school field trip that she barely remembered. Now she was here for something that would determine whether her stepfamily spent the next decade in prison. Marcus drove them. Lucien had insisted on arriving separately from the media circus, timing their entrance for maximum impact. Evelyn wore a gray suit that made her look older, more composed than she felt. Lucien stayed close, his presence a wall between her and everything else. The hallway outside the courtroom was packed. Reporters, lawyers, people Evelyn didn't recognize. And there, surrounded by a team of attorneys in expensive suits, stood Victoria. She looked smaller than Evelyn remembered. Thinner. The arrest had aged her, carved lines into her face that makeup couldn't hide. But her eyes were the same, calculating, cold, looking for weakness. Those eyes found Evelyn and went molten with rage. "Stay close," Lucian murmured. They walked forward. The crowd parted. Cameras flashed. Someone shouted a question that got lost in the noise. Victoria stepped forward, her lawyers trailing. "Evelyn, how generous of you to grace us with your presence." "Mrs. Ashford," Evelyn's voice came out steadier than she expected. "I'm here to watch justice happen." "Justice." Victoria's laugh was brittle. "Is that what you call this? Hiding behind your convenient new husband while my daughter faces charges for crimes she didn't commit?" "Claire committed fraud. The FBI has evidence." "Evidence you helped fabricate." "That's enough." Lucicienne's voice cut through the exchange like a blade. "Mrs. Ashford, if you have accusations, make them in court. Otherwise, stay away from my wife." "Your wife?" Victoria's gaze shifted to him, venomous. "You think marrying her makes this legitimate? Everyone knows what this is, a business transaction. She sold herself to avoid prosecution. Actually, I saved her from a fraud scheme your daughter orchestrated." Lucian's expression remained neutral, but his voice carried menace. "And if you continue harassing her, I'll make sure your legal troubles expand beyond federal charges. Do we understand each other?" For the first time in Evelyn's memory, Victoria backed down. The courtroom doors opened. People filed inside. Evelyn found herself sitting in the gallery, Lucienne beside her, watching as Victoria and Claire were led to the defense table. Claire looked worse than her mother, pale, drawn. The girl who'd once sparkled at parties now looked like she hadn't slept in days. She glanced back once, caught Evelyn's eye, and the hatred there was so pure it felt physical. The hearing was procedural. Lawyers arguing motions, the judge looking bored. Evidence presented that Evelyn only half understood. But the broad strokes were clear enough. The FBI had built a solid case. Shell companies, falsified documents, money trails that all led back to Claire. And nowhere in the evidence was Evelyn's name. Lucian's lawyers had made sure of that. During a recess, Victoria's lead attorney approached. Tall man, silver hair, the kind of lawyer who charged by the minute and made sure everyone knew it. "Mr. Varela, a word?" They moved to a corner. Evelyn stayed close enough to hear. "My client would like to propose a settlement," the lawyer said. "No settlement. Your client tried to destroy my wife's life. She can face the consequences." "Mr. Varela, surely we can be reasonable." "I am being reasonable. Reasonable would be pushing for maximum sentences. Reasonable would be filing civil suits that would bankrupt your client's entire family." Lucian's voice stayed quiet, deadly. "Instead, I'm letting federal prosecutors handle this. Be grateful for that." The lawyer's expression tightened. "Mrs. Ashford has resources, connections. She won't go quietly." "Neither will I." Lucian smiled, and it was the most dangerous thing Evelyn had ever seen. "Tell your client to focus on her own defense, because if she comes after my wife again, I won't just ruin her. I'll erase her, completely, until no one remembers she ever existed." The lawyer left without another word. Evelyn waited until they were alone. "Did you mean that?" "Every word." "Why? This isn't your fight. The contract doesn't require you to." "Yes, it does." He looked at her directly. "You're my wife. That means your enemies are my enemies. Your battles are my battles. Contract or not, that's how this works." Something in Evelyn's chest cracked. Not quite trust. Not yet. But the beginning of it. The hearing resumed, more arguments, more evidence. By the time the judge called a recess for the day, it was clear which way things were leaning. The prosecution had a strong case. Victoria and Claire were running out of options. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Evelyn let Lucien handle them, his responses professional and brief. Yes, he supported his wife. No, he had no comment on the charges. Yes, they were confident justice would be served. In the car heading back, Evelyn finally asked the question that had been building all day. What happens when this is over? When they're convicted? Then they're out of your life. Permanently. Lucien stared out the window. You'll be free. Will I? The words came out softer than intended. Or will I just trade one cage for another? He didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was careful. That depends on what you do with the freedom, but that's a problem for later. Right now, we focus on making sure you survive to have the choice. They drove the rest of the way in silence. That night, Lucia said and took the couch again. Evelyn lay in the too-big bed, staring at the ceiling, and tried to process everything. The hearing, Victoria's rage, the way Lucian had defended her without hesitation. She'd expected a business arrangement, cold, transactional. Instead, she was getting something she didn't have a name for, protection that felt personal, even when both of them insisted it wasn't. Her phone buzzed. Another unknown number. You think you won? You didn't. This is just beginning. See. Evelyn deleted it, turned off the phone, rolled over and tried to sleep. But Claire's words echoed anyway. This is just beginning. The next week passed in a blur of court appearances and careful performance. Every day, Evelyn and Lucian showed up together. Every day, the evidence against Victoria and Claire mounted. And every night, Evelyn went home to a penthouse that was starting to feel less like a prison and more like something she didn't have words for yet. Then, on a Thursday morning, everything changed. Evelyn was in the kitchen, coffee in hand, when the doorbell rang. Marcus answered it, voices in the hallway. Then Marcus appeared with a man Evelyn had never seen before, 60s. Weathered face, wearing a suit that had seen better days. Mrs. Varela? The man said. My name is Robert Crane. I'm your uncle, your father's brother. The coffee cup nearly slipped from Evelyn's hand. I don't have an uncle. You do. We've been estranged for years, since before your father died. He pulled out a wallet, showed her a photo. Two men, younger, smiling. She recognized her father immediately. Thomas was my brother, and I have something you need to see. Lucien appeared from his office, alerted by Marcus. What's going on? This man claims to be Evelyn's uncle, Marcus said. Robert turned to Lucien. Mr. Varela, I know this is unexpected, but I have information about Thomas Hart's estate. Information his daughter deserves to know. What kind of information? Lucian's voice was guarded. The kind that proves Victoria Ashford didn't just frame Evelyn for fraud. She stole from Thomas's estate for years, property, investments, money that should have gone to Evelyn. Robert pulled documents from a briefcase. I have proof, and I think it's time someone did something about it. Evelyn stared at the papers he was offering. Her father's name on the letterhead, property deeds, bank statements, a will that looked nothing like the one Victoria had produced 7 years ago. How long have you had this? She asked quietly. Too long. I should have come forward when Thomas died, but Victoria threatened me. Said she'd make sure I lost everything if I interfered. Robert's face was lined with regret. I was a coward. I let her win. But seeing you in the news, seeing what she tried to do to you, I couldn't stay quiet anymore. Lucien took the documents, scanned them quickly. His expression went very still. These are authentic? Certified copies. The originals are in a safe deposit box. Robert looked at Evelyn. Your father left you everything, Evelyn. The house, the investments, everything. Victoria forged documents to make it look like he'd changed his will after marrying her. But he didn't. It was always supposed to be yours. The floor tilted. Evelyn grabbed the counter for support. How much? Lucien asked. At the time of Thomas's death? About 12 million? With appreciation and the property values now? Robert paused. Closer to 20. $20 million. Her inheritance, stolen. I want it back, Evelyn heard herself say. All of it. I want everything she took from me. Robert smiled. That's what I was hoping you'd say. Because I have a lawyer who specializes in estate fraud, and he's very good at what he does. Lucien looked at Evelyn. You sure about this? It'll mean another legal battle. More time in courtrooms. More fighting. I'm sure. For the first time in days, Evelyn felt something other than fear or exhaustion. She felt rage, clean and sharp and focused. They stole my father's legacy. They stole my future. I'm done running. I'm done surviving. I want to fight back. Then we fight. Lucien turned to Robert. Who's this lawyer of yours? Daniel Morrison. Morrison and Associates. Best estate attorney in the state. I know him. He's good. Lucian pulled out his phone. I'll call my legal team. Have them coordinate with Morrison. We'll bury Victoria in so many lawsuits she won't know which way is up. Robert shook Evelyn's hand. Your father would be proud. He always said you were stronger than you knew. After he left, Evelyn stood in the middle of the kitchen, documents spread across the counter, and felt something shift inside her. For 7 years she'd been a victim, a pawn in someone else's game, not anymore. Thank you, she said to Lucien. For what? For not trying to talk me out of this. For not saying it's too much, too hard. Why would I do that? He gathered the documents, already organizing them. This is your fight, your legacy. I'm just making sure you have the weapons you need to win it. Still, you didn't have to. Yes, I did. He looked at her, and something in his expression was different, less guarded, more real. You're not just a contract anymore, Evelyn. You're my wife. And my wife doesn't bow to people who tried to destroy her. She fights back, with everything she has. The words settled over her like armor. That night, Lucien didn't take the couch. They shared the bed, each on their own side, not touching, but not avoiding either. Just two people who'd somehow become allies in a war neither had expected to fight. Evelyn lay awake, listening to him breathe, and realized something had changed between them. The marriage had started as survival, but somewhere along the way it had become something else. Partnership, maybe. Or the beginning of it. And for the first time since her father died, Evelyn felt like she had a chance at winning. Not just surviving, actually winning. The war for her father's legacy had just begun, and she had no intention of losing. Daniel Morrison's office occupied the 40th floor of a building that probably predated half the city's current skyline. Old money architecture with modern security, the kind of place that whispered legitimacy through every polished surface. Evelyn sat across from him 3 days after her uncle's visit, watching him page through documents with the focused intensity of a surgeon examining x-rays. This is solid, Morrison said finally. He was younger than Evelyn expected, maybe 45 with sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. The will is legitimate. The property transfers Victoria executed were fraudulent. We have grounds for a full estate challenge. How long will it take? Lucien asked from the chair beside Evelyn. Months, maybe a year. Estate fraud cases move slowly, and Victoria will fight every step. Morrison set down the papers, folded his hands. Mrs. Varela, I need you to understand what you're signing up for. This won't be quick. It won't be easy, and it's going to get ugly. It's already ugly, Evelyn said. They tried to send me to prison. How much worse can it get? They'll attack your credibility, your character, your marriage. Morrison glanced at Lucien. No offense, but the timing of your marriage works against us. Victoria's attorneys will argue you're being manipulated, that Mr. Varela has financial interest in recovering the estate. Let them argue. Evelyn's voice came out stronger than she felt. I'm not backing down. Morrison smiled. Good. Then let's bury them. The next 3 weeks were a masterclass in legal warfare. Morrison filed the estate challenge on a Monday. By Tuesday, Victoria's attorneys had filed counterclaims. By Friday, both sides were buried in discovery requests, depositions, and motions that required Evelyn to relive every detail of her father's death and the years that followed. She spent hours in Morrison's office, answering questions about her relationship with Thomas, her life with Victoria, every conversation she could remember about money or property or inheritance. Lucien sat through most of it, silent but present, occasionally interjecting when the lawyers pushed too hard. We need to talk about the house, Morrison said during one session. The estate in Greenwich. Victoria's been living there since your father's death, claiming it as her primary residence. That was my father's house, Evelyn said quietly. He bought it before he met Victoria. She only lived there 2 years before he died. But she's maintained it for 7 years since, paid taxes, made improvements. Morrison pulled up photos on his laptop. She's going to argue she has legitimate claim through adverse possession and community property laws. Evelyn looked at the images, the house she'd grown up in, altered beyond recognition. New paint, renovated gardens, nothing that looked like home anymore. Can we get it back? She asked. Possibly, but it might not be worth the fight. The real value is in the investment portfolio and the commercial properties downtown. Focus there. Let her keep the house as part of settlement. We'd come out ahead financially. No. The word surprised Evelyn with its force. That house was my father's. She doesn't get to keep it just because she's been squatting there for 7 years. Morrison and Lucien exchanged a look. Evelyn, Lucien said carefully, Morrison's right. Strategically, the house isn't worth... I don't care about strategy. I care about what's mine. She met his eyes. You said this was my fight, my legacy. So let me fight for all of it, not just the parts that make financial sense. Lucien was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded. Morrison, file for the house too. Whatever it takes. That's going to complicate things. I said file for it. Lucien's tone left no room for argument. Mrs. Varela wants her father's house back. Make it happen. Morrison sighed, made a note. Your funeral, both of you. But Evelyn felt something loosen in her chest. For 7 years, she'd compromised, stayed small, accepted less than she deserved because fighting seemed impossible. Not anymore. The estate battle raged alongside the criminal case against Victoria and Claire. Some days Evelyn couldn't keep track of which courthouse they were heading to or which set of lawyers she was meeting. The calendar became a blur of depositions and hearings and strategy sessions that stretched late into the night. Through all of it, Lucien stayed close. Not hovering, he had his own empire to run, but present when it mattered. He sat through depositions, reviewed legal strategies, made calls to people whose names Evelyn didn't recognize but whose influence was obvious in how quickly things moved after he talked to them. You don't have to do this, Evelyn said one night after a particularly brutal deposition where Victoria's lawyers had spent 4 hours trying to discredit her memory of conversations from a decade ago. They were back at the penthouse, Evelyn exhausted and wrung out, Lucien working through emails on his laptop. Do what? He asked without looking up. All of this. The lawyers, the support. We had a deal. I show up for public appearances, you get your development project approved. This, she gestured vaguely at the case files scattered across the dining table. This isn't part of that deal. Now he looked up. You're right. It's not. So why? Lucien closed his laptop, gave her his full attention. You want the honest answer? Always. Because somewhere between the FBI showing up at that hotel and you deciding to fight for your father's legacy, this stopped being just a business arrangement. He paused, choosing words carefully. I don't do relationships, Evelyn. I don't do emotional investment, but I do protect what's mine, and you're mine now, which means your fight is my fight, whether the contract covers it or not. The words should have felt possessive, wrong. Instead, they felt like the first solid ground she'd stood on in weeks. I don't know how to do this, Evelyn admitted quietly. Do what? Let someone help. Trust that you're not going to... She stopped, unable to finish. Use it against you later? Lucien's voice was gentle. I'm not them, Evelyn. I'm not going to build you up just to tear you down when it's convenient. How do I know that? You don't. Not for sure. That's what trust is. Choosing to believe someone even when you can't prove they deserve it. He stood, walked to where she sat, but didn't touch her. Just stood close enough that she could feel his presence. I know that's hard for you, after everything they did, but I'm asking you to try. Evelyn looked up at him. This man who'd married her to save his business deal and somehow ended up fighting her battles like they were his own. Okay, she whispered. Okay, I'll try. To trust you. She took a breath. But if you break that trust, then you take the $5 million and disappear. I know. The contract's very clear. His mouth quirked. Though I'd prefer you stick around. You're turning out to be more interesting than I expected. Is that a compliment? From me? Absolutely. Despite everything, Evelyn almost smiled. That night, they fell asleep in the same bed, still on separate sides, but somehow closer than before. Not touching, but not avoiding either. Just existing in the same space without the walls that had been there at the beginning. Progress, Evelyn thought, as sleep pulled her under. Small, but real. The development deal closed on a Wednesday morning in Morrison's conference room, surrounded by lawyers and investors who all looked like they'd stepped out of the same Brooks Brothers catalog. Lucien signed documents. Investors signed documents. Everyone shook hands with the enthusiasm of people who'd just made a lot of money. Evelyn sat in the corner, technically unnecessary but invited anyway. She watched Lucien navigate the room with practiced ease, every handshake calculated, every smile professional. This was his world, power and money and deals that shaped the city's skyline. She didn't belong here, but Lucien kept glancing at her, small looks that said, "I see you, you matter." And somehow that made the whole performance more bearable. Afterward, in the car heading back to the penthouse, Lucien was quieter than usual. "You okay?" Evelyn asked. "Fine. Just thinking." "About?" "The project. What comes next?" He stared out the window. "The investors are happy. The deal's done. Construction starts next month." "That's good, isn't it?" "It's what I wanted, what I needed." He turned to look at her. "But now that we're here, I keep thinking about the timeline." "The timeline. The contract. 18 months or deal completion, whichever came first." The deal was complete, which meant technically they could end this. Sign divorce papers. Go their separate ways. Evelyn's stomach dropped. Do you want to? No. The word came fast, almost offensive. That's not what I meant." "Then what did you mean?" Lucien ran a hand through his hair, looking uncomfortable for the first time since she'd known him. "I meant that the original reason for this marriage is fulfilled, but the estate case is still ongoing. Your stepfamily's still a threat, and—" He stopped. "And what?" "And I don't want you to feel trapped. The contract gave you an out after the deal closed. If you want to take it, I'll honor that. But if you want to stay—" Another pause, longer this time. "I'd like you to stay." The confession hung between them, raw and honest in a way Lucien usually avoided. "Why?" Evelyn asked softly. "Because this works. Whatever this is, partnership, alliance, arrangement, it works. You're not what I expected when I proposed this deal. You're stronger, smarter. You fight back when most people would fold." He met her eyes. "I like that. I like you. And I want to see where this goes if we're not operating under contract obligations." Evelyn's heart did something complicated in her chest. "You're asking me to stay married to you, for real?" "I'm asking you to stay married to me and see what happens. No contract, no obligation, just—" He struggled for the word, "us," whatever that means. "That's terrifying." "I know. What if it doesn't work?" "Then we divorce like normal people. Sign papers, split assets, move on." His voice softened. "But what if it does work?" Evelyn thought about the past month. The way Lucien had defended her against Victoria, sat through depositions, made calls to lawyers at midnight, the way he'd respected her choice to fight for the house, even when it didn't make strategic sense. The way he'd somehow become the most stable thing in her life without either of them planning it. "Okay," she said. "Okay, I'll stay. We'll see what happens." She took a breath. "But I need you to understand something. I'm not good at this. Relationships, trust, any of it. Victoria spent years teaching me that people only help when they want something, that kindness always comes with conditions. I'm not asking for kindness, I'm asking for partnership. What's the difference? Kindness is about being nice. Partnership is about being honest." Lucien's expression was serious. "I'm not going to lie to you, Evelyn. I'm not going to pretend I'm something I'm not. I'm difficult. I work too much. I don't do emotional vulnerability well. But I show up, I follow through, and I don't quit on people who matter to me." "And I matter to you?" "More than I expected you to, yes." The honesty of it stole Evelyn's breath. "Then I'm in," she said. "No contract. Just us. Whatever that means." Lucien's smile was small but genuine. "Good, because I have something to show you." 20 minutes later, they pulled up to the building with the green roof, the development project that had started this whole arrangement. Construction barriers surrounded the site, but Lucien had a key card that got them past security. Inside, the space was raw, exposed concrete, bare walls, the skeleton of what would eventually become something impressive. But Evelyn could see the potential. Floor-to-ceiling windows, open layouts, space that would flood with light. "This is the 8th floor," Lucien said, leading her through the construction zone. "The community services level. Clinics going here, legal aid offices here, job training center in the back." He walked her through it all, pointing out features that didn't exist yet, but that he could clearly see in his mind. Evelyn watched him talk, saw the passion underneath the usual careful control. "Why does this matter so much to you?" she asked when he paused. Lucien was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at the city beyond. When he spoke, his voice was different, stripped of the usual armor. "My father was a construction worker. Good man, hard worker. Got injured on a job site when I was 15. Back injury. Couldn't work anymore." He kept his eyes on the window. "We had no insurance, no safety net. He spent 2 years fighting for disability payments while we burned through savings. My mother worked 3 jobs. I worked after school. It still wasn't enough." "What happened?" "He died. Infection from the injury that he couldn't afford to treat properly. I was 17. Now Lucien looked at her. "I built this empire so I'd never be helpless like that again. Never have to watch someone I love suffer because they couldn't afford basic care. But somewhere along the way, I realized having money wasn't enough. I needed to do something with it that mattered. So you built this." "So I built this. Medical care, legal help, job training, everything my family needed and couldn't access." His jaw tightened. "The investors don't care about that part. They care about tax breaks and good PR. But I care. This is why I needed the deal to go through, why I was willing to do whatever it took." Including marrying a stranger, Evelyn thought. Including upending both their lives. "I'm sorry about your father," she said quietly. "I'm sorry about yours too." He turned to face her fully. "But here's what I'm thinking. You've been fighting for your father's legacy, the property, the money, the house, all external things. What if you fought for something more?" "Like what?" "Like this." He gestured to the space around them. "This floor needs someone to run it, coordinate the programs, make sure they actually help people instead of just looking good on paper. I've been interviewing candidates, but they're all corporate types who've never needed these services. They don't understand what it's like to be desperate." "And you think I do?" "I know you do. You've spent 7 years invisible, struggling, working jobs that barely paid rent while trying to finish school. You know what it's like to need help and have nowhere to turn." His expression was open, honest. "I'm not offering you a pity job, Evelyn. I'm offering you a chance to build something that matters. Use your father's legacy to create something he would have been proud of." The idea settled over Evelyn like possibility. Not just fighting to reclaim what was stolen, but creating something new. Something that helped people the way she'd needed help. "I don't have experience." "You have empathy, understanding, the ability to see people instead of statistics." Lucien moved closer. "Everything else can be learned, but those qualities can't be taught, and they're what this place needs." Evelyn looked around the empty floor, trying to imagine it filled with people seeking help. Families who needed medical care, workers who needed legal protection, people like her father had been. People like she'd been. "Okay," she said. "Okay? Yes, I want to do this." She met his eyes. "I want to help build something that matters." Lucien's smile was real this time, reaching his eyes in a way she'd never seen before. "Then let's get to work." The next 3 months were chaos of a different kind. Evelyn split her time between the estate case and the community center, learning both fights simultaneously. Morson's team worked through legal challenges while Evelyn interviewed potential staff, reviewed program proposals, and learned how to manage budgets that made her old paycheck look like pocket change. Lucien was there through all of it, sometimes leading, sometimes following, always present. They fell into a rhythm, early mornings reviewing center plans over coffee, afternoons in court or depositions, evenings working side by side at the dining table until exhaustion forced them to bed. The bed they now shared without discussion. Not performing for investigators anymore. Just 2 people who'd gotten used to sleeping in the same space. One night, 3 months after the development deal closed, Evelyn woke around 2 a.m. to find Lucien's side of the bed empty. She found him in his office, surrounded by blueprints and budget reports, looking exhausted. "Can't sleep?" she asked from the doorway. He looked up, surprised. "Did I wake you?" "No." Bed felt empty. The admission came out before she could stop it. Something shifted in Lucien's expression. "Come here." She walked over. He pulled her into his lap, buried his face in her shoulder, and just held her. No words. No explanation. Just the quiet comfort of another person's presence. "The construction's behind schedule, so he said finally, voice muffled against her sweater. Permit issues, labor disputes, everything that could go wrong is going wrong. What do you need? This. Just this. He pulled back enough to look at her. I'm not good at asking for help, never have been, but you make it easier somehow. Evelyn touched his face, feeling stubble rough under her palm. We're partners, remember? That means when you're drowning, I throw you a rope. And when you're drowning, you've already thrown me about 15 ropes. I figure I owe you. He smiled, tired but genuine. I'm keeping count. You're still ahead. Then I'll keep throwing ropes until we're even. They stayed like that for a while, just holding each other in the quiet dark. Eventually, Lucien stood, carrying her back to the bedroom like she weighed nothing. They fell asleep tangled together, no space between them, and Evelyn realized something had fundamentally shifted. This wasn't a contract anymore. It wasn't even an arrangement. It was real. The estate case reached its climax on a cold morning in November. Final hearing. Both sides presenting closing arguments. The judge would rule on whether Victoria's claim to the property was legitimate or whether everything reverted to Evelyn as Thomas Hart's rightful heir. Evelyn sat in the courtroom wearing a black suit that made her look older, stronger. Lucien beside her, his presence a wall between her and everything else. Morrison at the plaintiff's table, shuffling papers with practiced calm. Across the aisle, Victoria sat rigid and furious, her legal team looking less confident than they had 3 months ago. The judge entered. Everyone stood. The machinery of justice ground forward. Morrison presented his case with surgical precision. The original will, the forged documents, the pattern of theft that stretched back 7 years, Evelyn's testimony from previous depositions, clear and damning. Victoria's attorney tried to argue adverse possession, community property, legitimate claim through marriage. But the evidence was too strong, the fraud too obvious. When both sides rested, the judge took less than 10 minutes to deliberate. I find in favor of the plaintiff, he said, voice carrying clearly through the courtroom. The evidence clearly demonstrates that Victoria Ashford fraudulently altered Thomas Hart's will and illegally transferred property that rightfully belonged to his daughter. All assets are hereby restored to Evelyn Hart Varela, effective immediately. The gavel fell. Evelyn heard it like it was happening to someone else, distantly, unreally. She'd won. Everything, the house, the investments, the property, all of it was hers again. Victoria's face went white, then red. She stood shaking with rage and turned to face Evelyn directly. This isn't over, she hissed. You think you won? You didn't win anything? You're still nothing, still worthless, still… That's enough. Lucien's voice cut through the courtroom like a blade. He stood, positioning himself between Victoria and Evelyn. You lost. Accept it. And stay away from my wife. If you contact her again, if you come near her, if you so much as breathe in her direction, I will make the rest of your life a legal nightmare you can't wake up from. Are we clear? Victoria opened her mouth, closed it. For the first time in Evelyn's memory, she had nothing to say. Her lawyers escorted her out. The courtroom emptied. Morrison shook Evelyn's hand, congratulated her, promised to handle the transfer paperwork. And then it was just Evelyn and Lucien standing in the empty courtroom where she'd just reclaimed everything her father had wanted her to have. You did it, Lucien said quietly. We did it. Evelyn turned to him. I couldn't have done this without you. You could have. You're stronger than you think. Maybe. But I didn't have to do it alone. That's what matters. She took his hand, squeezed. Thank you for everything. You're welcome. But I didn't do it for thanks. Why did you do it? Lucien pulled her close, right there in the empty courtroom, and kissed her. Not for show, not for performance, just because he wanted to. When he pulled back, his eyes were serious. Because somewhere between that hotel corridor and today, I fell in love with you, and I don't want this to be temporary anymore. The words hung between them, huge and terrifying and real. I love you too, Evelyn whispered. I didn't plan to. I tried not to. But I do. So what do we do about it? We stay married, for real this time. Not because of contracts or deals or investigations, just because we want to. That simple? That simple. Lucien smiled and it transformed his whole face. Then let's go home. They walked out of the courthouse together, hand in hand, into a future neither of them had planned, but both of them wanted. The transaction had become a partnership, and the partnership had become love, exactly as neither of them expected. The house in Greenwich looked smaller than Evelyn remembered. She stood on the front walkway 3 weeks after the court ruling, keys in hand, staring at the colonial-style home that had once meant everything. Lucien waited beside her, patient and quiet, letting her process whatever she needed to feel. "You don't have to go in," he said. "Yes, I do." Evelyn's fingers tightened around the keys. "I need to see it. Need to know if it still feels like home or if she destroyed that too." The door opened easily. Inside, the air smelled like furniture polish, and something floral Victoria had probably sprayed to cover the staleness of a house nobody actually lived in anymore. The FBI had seized it during the investigation, and Victoria hadn't been allowed back since her arrest. Evelyn walked through rooms that felt like museum exhibits of someone else's life. The furniture was different. The paint colors had changed. Even the layout had been altered. Walls removed, spaces opened up, nothing where it used to be. Her father's study was gone entirely, converted into some kind of sitting room with cream-colored sofas and abstract art that meant nothing. "She erased him," Evelyn said quietly. "Every trace, like he never existed." Lucien touched her shoulder. "She tried to, but she failed. You're still here. His legacy is still here. She couldn't erase that." They walked upstairs. Evelyn's old bedroom had become a guest room, painted beige and decorated with the kind of impersonal taste that belonged in hotel magazines. Nothing remained of the girl who'd lived here. Not the wallpaper she'd picked at 13, not the bookshelf her father had built, not even the window seat where she used to read. "I don't want this house," Evelyn said suddenly. Lucien turned to look at her. "What?" "I don't want it. I thought I did. I fought for it because it was his, because she stole it, because it felt important." She looked around the sterile room. "But it's not home anymore. It's just a building where bad things happened. I don't need to live here to honor his memory." "What do you want to do with it?" Evelyn thought for a moment, an idea forming that felt right in a way nothing else had. "Sell it. Use the money for the community center. Expand the programs. Help more people." She met his eyes. That's what he would have wanted. Not me clinging to a house that doesn't mean anything anymore, but using what he left me to do something good. Lucien smiled. "You're sure?" "Completely." She took one last look around, said a silent goodbye to the father who'd loved her here, and walked out. "Let's go home." Home, she realized as they drove back to the city, wasn't the penthouse either. It was wherever Lucien was. Wherever they built something together that mattered more than property or money or winning. The community center opened its doors on a Saturday morning in early December. Evelyn had spent the past 2 months working 18-hour days to make it happen, hiring staff, finalizing programs, coordinating with medical providers and legal aid organizations and job training specialists. The space that had been bare concrete and potential was now warm and functional, designed to welcome people who needed help without making them feel like charity cases. Lucien had wanted a grand opening, press coverage, investors, the kind of event that generated good publicity and tax benefits. Evelyn had vetoed all of it. "This isn't about us," she'd told him. "It's about the people who need these services. Let's just open the doors and do the work." So they did. The first person through the door was a woman in her 40s carrying a folder full of medical bills she couldn't pay. The second was a young man who'd been injured at work and needed legal help filing for workers' compensation. By noon, 30 people had walked through, each carrying burdens they'd been shouldering alone. Evelyn watched the medical clinic in action. Doctors seeing patients who couldn't afford insurance, nurses treating injuries that had been ignored too long, social workers connecting families with resources they didn't know existed. The legal aid office was fully booked, attorneys helping with everything from housing disputes to wage theft. This was what her father's money should have been doing all along. Not sitting in Victoria's investment accounts, not funding parties and expensive clothes and the performance of wealth, but actually helping people who needed it. "You're crying," Lucien said quietly. He'd appeared beside her without her noticing, holding 2 cups of coffee. Evelyn touched her face, surprised to find it wet. "Happy crying. Is that allowed?" "I'll permit it." He handed her a coffee. "You did this, you know. This whole floor, all these people getting help, that's you. It's us, you're building. Your vision, my building, your heart. He pulled her close, right there in the middle of the bustling center. I built the structure. You made it matter. A little girl ran past, laughing, chased by what looked like her older brother. Their mother sat in the clinic waiting room, looking less stressed than she had when she'd arrived. Small moments, small victories. But they added up to something larger than either Evelyn or Lucien could have created alone. Thank you, Evelyn said. For what? For seeing something in me I didn't see in myself. For giving me a chance to build this. You're welcome. But I didn't give you anything you didn't already have. I just helped you remember it was there. They stood together, watching the center do exactly what it was designed for, and Evelyn felt something settle into place. Purpose. The kind that came from helping instead of just surviving. The federal case against Victoria and Claire concluded 2 weeks before Christmas. Evelyn didn't attend the sentencing hearing. She'd moved past needing to see them punished. Morrison sent her a text with the results. Victoria, 4 years, eligible for parole in 2. Claire, 6 years, no early release. Both would serve time in minimum security facilities, white-collar prisons that were more like strict boarding schools than actual punishment. But they'd lost everything else: their reputation, their wealth, their place in the society they'd valued above everything. How do you feel? Lucien asked when Evelyn read him the text. She thought about it honestly. Relieved, not happy exactly, just done. Like I can finally stop looking over my shoulder. That's fair. He set down the legal brief he'd been reviewing. For what it's worth, I'm proud of you. For what? I didn't do anything except survive what they did to me. No. You did more than survive. You fought back. You reclaimed what was yours, and then you used it to help other people instead of just hoarding it like they did. He moved closer. That takes strength Victoria never had. Character Claire couldn't imagine. You won, Evelyn, not just legally, actually won. The words settled over her like a truth she'd needed to hear. She had won. Not because Victoria was in prison or because she'd gotten her inheritance back, but because she'd refused to let them make her small, refused to stay invisible, refused to accept that survival was the best she deserved. Christmas came quietly. Lucien's mother insisted they join her for dinner, and Evelyn found herself in the same dining room where they'd performed their marriage charade months ago. But this time, nothing was performance. Diana saw it immediately. The way Lucien watched Evelyn, the casual touches that spoke of intimacy, the inside jokes that came from actually knowing each other. I'm glad you stayed, Diana said to Evelyn while Lucien was in the kitchen getting more wine. Stayed? I knew the marriage was strategy at first. Lucien's not subtle when he's trying to hide something. Diana's smile was knowing. But somewhere along the way, it became real. You became real to him. He became real to me too, Evelyn admitted. I didn't expect that. Love rarely announces itself the way we think it will. Sometimes it just shows up disguised as partnership and refuses to leave. Diana touched Evelyn's hand. Take care of each other. That's all that matters. Lucien returned with wine and suspicion. What are you two talking about? Nothing important, Diana said innocently. Just how much better you look now than you did 6 months ago. I look exactly the same. You really don't. But Diana let it drop, moving the conversation to safer topics. Later, driving back to the city, Evelyn thought about Diana's words. Love disguised as partnership. That's exactly what had happened. They'd built something practical and discovered it had become something more without either of them noticing the transition. Your mother likes me, Evelyn said. She adores you, has since the first dinner. Lucien kept his eyes on the road. She told me last week that I'd be an idiot if I let you go. What did you say? That I had no intention of being an idiot. He glanced at her briefly. I meant it, by the way. What I said in the courtroom, I love you, that hasn't changed. Good. Because I love you too, and that's not changing either. They drove the rest of the way in comfortable silence, the kind that came from not needing to fill every moment with words. New Year's came with an invitation Evelyn almost declined. A society gala, the kind of event she used to serve drinks at, invisible in her black uniform. Now she was invited as Lucien Varella's wife, expected to attend and be seen and participate in the world that had once excluded her. We don't have to go, Lucian said when he saw her hesitation. Yes, we do. You need to be there for business. Evelyn set down the invitation. Besides, I can't hide forever. If I'm going to do this, be your wife, run the community center, exist in this world, I need to stop being afraid of being seen. You were never invisible, Evelyn. You were just surrounded by people who refused to look. Then let's go somewhere they have to look. The gala was at the plaza, all chandeliers and champagne and people wearing jewelry that cost more than most cars. Evelyn wore midnight blue silk, her hair swept up, looking like she belonged there because she'd decided she did. She recognized faces from her serving days. Some ignored her. Some looked confused, trying to place how they knew her. A few approached with congratulations on the marriage, fake warmth that didn't reach their eyes. Evelyn handled all of it with grace she'd learned from watching them. Smile, deflect, give nothing real away. Then she saw someone she hadn't expected. Marcus Joe, one of Richard's groomsmen from the engagement party where this had all started. He approached with genuine warmth, hand extended. Evelyn, I heard about everything. The marriage, the legal case, all of it. He shook her hand firmly. I wanted to apologize. I should have seen what Victoria and Claire were doing, should have said something. You didn't know, Evelyn said, surprised by the apology. I suspected. That's almost worse. Marcus looked uncomfortable. Richard did too, actually. He's been trying to distance himself from his mother since the arrest. If it helps, he feels terrible about how they treated you. It didn't help, not really. Richard had watched her be erased for 7 years and done nothing. But Evelyn appreciated the attempt. Tell him I'm doing fine now. Better than fine, actually. I can see that. Marcus glanced at Lucian, who was watching the exchange with careful attention. You landed on your feet. I did, with help. She squeezed Lucien's hand. But I'm standing on my own now. Marcus nodded, excused himself, and disappeared into the crowd. You okay? Lucien asked quietly. Yeah, just strange being back in this world as myself instead of invisible. Get used to it. You're not invisible anymore, and you never will be again. He was right. People noticed her now, not as Lucian Varella's wife, but as Evelyn Varela, the woman running the community center that was already making headlines for its innovative programs. Journalists had started calling for interviews. Nonprofit organizations wanted to collaborate. She'd become someone worth paying attention to. But the attention didn't scare her anymore. She'd learned something Victoria never understood. Power didn't come from being seen. It came from knowing who you were when nobody was watching. The community center's 6-month anniversary arrived with numbers that exceeded every projection. 500 families served, 300 legal cases resolved, dozens of people placed in jobs they couldn't have accessed before. The medical clinic was booked solid for weeks. Evelyn stood in front of the staff at their monthly meeting, looking at the people who'd made it all possible. I know I say this every month, but thank you, all of you. She looked around the conference room. 6 months ago, this was just an idea. Now it's real. Now it's helping people. And that's because you showed up every day and did the work. Dr. Sarah Chen, who ran the medical clinic, raised her hand. Actually, it's because you believed in it. We're just following your lead. Our lead, Evelyn corrected, gesturing to include Lucien, who stood at the back of the room. This was never one person's vision. It's all of us working together. After the meeting, after everyone had left, Evelyn and Lucien stood in the empty conference room surrounded by charts showing their impact. We should expand, Evelyn said. Open a second location, maybe in Brooklyn, somewhere that needs these services just as badly. Already looking at properties. Lucien pulled up something on his phone. Found 3 possibilities. Want to see them this weekend? You're serious? Why wouldn't I be? This works. It matters. Why not do it again? He pocketed his phone. Besides, watching you build this has been the best investment I've ever made. I'd be stupid not to double down. Evelyn moved closer, wrapped her arms around him. I love you. I love you too. He held her, and for a moment they just stood there, in the quiet center they'd built together. You know what the best part is? What? We get to keep doing this, building things, helping people, being partners. He pulled back to look at her. Not because a contract says we have to, just because we want to. Just because we want to, Evelyn repeated. I like that. They locked up the center and headed home, walking instead of taking the car because the spring evening was perfect and neither of them was in a hurry. "Do you ever think about how different everything could have been?" Evelyn asked. "If you hadn't shown up that night at the hotel? If I'd said no?" "Sometimes, usually when I can't sleep." Lucian's hand found hers, fingers interlacing. "But then I remember I'd still be married to my business. You'd still be fighting your stepfamily alone. This," he gestured between them, "wouldn't exist. And I can't imagine that anymore." "Me neither." Evelyn stopped walking, pulled him close right there on the sidewalk. "Thank you for giving me a choice when I had none, for making me remember I was worth fighting for. You did that yourself. I just provided the opportunity." "No, you did more than that. You saw me when I'd forgotten how to see myself." They kissed there on the corner of 5th and 42nd, surrounded by strangers who didn't care and city noise that didn't matter. And Evelyn felt something she hadn't felt since her father died. Home. Not a place. A person. A partnership. A life they'd built from desperation and turned into something neither of them had planned but both of them wanted. The Greenwich house sold in April to a family with 3 kids who promised to fill it with the kind of chaos and love it had been missing. Evelyn watched the closing papers get signed and felt nothing except relief. The money went straight into the expansion fund for the second community center. Victoria's first parole hearing happened around the same time. Evelyn received notice she could submit a victim impact statement if she wanted. She declined. "You sure?" Morrison asked when she told him. "This is your chance to tell her exactly what she did to you." "She knows what she did, and I've spent enough time talking about her." Evelyn signed the form, declining to participate. "I'm done giving her space in my life." Morrison respected that, filed the paperwork, and Victoria was denied parole anyway. She'd served the full 4 years. Evelyn felt nothing when she heard. Not satisfaction, not vindication, just the quiet knowledge that justice had happened and she could move forward without looking back. Claire tried reaching out twice from prison, letters that arrived at the penthouse addressed to Evelyn. Both went straight into the trash, unopened. Whatever Claire had to say, Evelyn didn't need to hear it. That chapter was closed. The second community center opened in Brooklyn in late summer, in a neighborhood that needed it desperately. Same model, same programs, different building. Evelyn hired locally, found staff who understood the community they were serving, and watched the same pattern repeat. People walking in burdened, walking out with resources and hope. At the ribbon-cutting ceremony, a reporter asked Evelyn what drove her to do this work. She thought about the question honestly before answering. "I spent years invisible, erased, surviving instead of living. I know what it's like to need help and have nowhere to turn. These centers exist so nobody else has to feel that way." The quote made it into newspapers and online articles. Suddenly, Evelyn was fielding requests for speaking engagements, nonprofit boards asking her to join, organizations wanting to replicate her model. "You're becoming famous," Lucien observed one evening, scrolling through his phone where Evelyn's face appeared in multiple news feeds. "I'm becoming visible," she corrected. "There's a difference." "Is it overwhelming?" "Sometimes, but it's also proof that I'm not that scared girl in the hotel corridor anymore. I'm someone who built something, someone who matters." "You always mattered. The world just wasn't paying attention. And now they are, which means I better use it for something good." She did. Over the next year, Evelyn became a voice for the invisible people, testifying before city council about affordable housing, speaking at conferences about accessible healthcare, advocating for worker protections that could have saved Lucien's father. She didn't do it for fame or recognition. She did it because she finally understood what her father had wanted for her. Not wealth for its own sake, but the ability to use whatever resources she had to make the world slightly less cruel for people who needed someone fighting for them. And she had Lucien beside her through all of it. Not leading, not following, just partnering. Building their separate empires, his in real estate development, hers in community advocacy, and finding ways to make them strengthen each other. Diana passed away quietly in her sleep 2 years after the centers opened. Lucien took it hard, retreating into work the way he always did when emotions got too big to handle. Evelyn gave him space but stayed close, understanding that grief didn't follow timelines or logic. "She liked you," Lucien said one night, holding a photo of his mother from happier times. Said you saved me from becoming someone who only cared about buildings and money. I think you saved yourself. I just reminded you that you cared about more than that. She also said I should marry you again, properly this time, with family and celebration and all the things we skipped the first time. Evelyn looked up from the paperwork she'd been reviewing. What do you think? I think we're already married, but I also think she had a point. Lucian set down the photo, moved to where Evelyn sat. We started with a contract. We built a partnership. We fell in love. Maybe it's time we celebrated that properly. Are you proposing? I'm already your husband. I'm proposing we do it again. With intention this time. With people who matter watching. With vows we actually mean. Evelyn's throat tightened. Yes. Yes? Yes, let's do it properly. Let's celebrate what we built. They remarried 6 months later in a small ceremony at the original community center, surrounded by staff and families they'd helped, and the few people who actually mattered to them. No society pages, no investors, no performance, just two people who'd found each other in the worst circumstances and built something beautiful anyway. Evelyn wore simple white. Lucien wore a suit he had owned for years. They wrote their own vows, Evelyn promising to keep fighting for people who needed someone in their corner, Lucien promising to keep building spaces where that fighting could happen. At the reception, Robert Crane, the uncle who'd brought evidence of the estate theft, toasted them with tears in his eyes. Your father would be so proud, he said, not because you got your inheritance back, but because you used it the way he would have wanted, to help people, to build something good, to be the person he always knew you could be. Evelyn cried through the whole toast, and Lucien held her hand, and nobody tried to make her stop because grief and joy could exist in the same space. That was the lesson she'd learned through all of it, that surviving and living weren't the same thing, that visibility didn't mean value. Value existed whether anyone saw it or not, that love didn't always announce itself with romance and flowers. Sometimes it showed up disguised as partnership and proved itself through action. 5 years after that desperate night in the hotel corridor, Evelyn stood in the 4th community center they'd opened, this one in Queens, and watched a young woman walk through the doors looking lost and scared, the same way Evelyn had looked once. She approached carefully. Can I help you? The woman hesitated. I don't know. Everything's falling apart and I don't know what to do. Then you're in the right place. Evelyn gestured to the intake desk. Come on, let's figure this out together. She spent the next hour connecting this stranger with resources, watching the fear slowly leave her face as she realized she wasn't alone. It wasn't dramatic. It wouldn't make headlines. But it mattered more than anything else Evelyn could have been doing. This was the point. Not revenge on Victoria, not reclaiming her inheritance, not even falling in love with Lucien, though that had been a gift she hadn't expected. The point was using what she'd survived to help other people survive. Using her visibility to shine light on people who needed to be seen, using her voice to speak for people who'd been silenced. Lucien found her afterward, surrounded by case files and program proposals. Ready to go home? Almost. Just need to finish this application review. He pulled up a chair, started helping without being asked. This was their rhythm now, working side by side, building things together, making each other better without trying. I love you, Evelyn said, not looking up from the paperwork. I love you too. Simple words, but they meant everything. Because Evelyn had learned that love wasn't about grand gestures or perfect moments. It was about showing up, following through, being honest even when it was hard, building something together that mattered more than either person alone. She'd entered Lucien's world believing she was trading one cage for another. Instead, she'd found the key to every cage anyone had ever built around her. Not through money or revenge or winning legal battles, though all those things had helped. Through remembering who she was, refusing to stay small, fighting for what mattered, and finding someone who would fight beside her instead of trying to control the battlefield. The centers kept growing, the families kept coming, the work kept mattering, and Evelyn kept showing up, day after day, proving to herself and everyone else that the frightened woman who'd accepted a devil's bargain in a hotel corridor no longer existed. In her place stood someone stronger, someone visible, someone who'd taken the worst thing that ever happened to her and turned it into the best thing she'd ever built. Not alone. But that was the point, too. Nobody fought their way out of darkness alone. Nobody built something meaningful without help. Nobody survived without someone believing they were worth saving. Lucien had believed it when Evelyn couldn't, and now she spent every day believing it for other people who'd forgotten. That was the legacy her father had really left her. Not money, not property, not even justice. But the understanding that being seen, really seen, was the first step to remembering you were worth seeing. Everything else followed from there. The woman who'd walked into the center that day left 2 hours later with a legal aid appointment, a medical referral, and the knowledge that someone cared whether she made it through tomorrow. Small victory, small moment, but it added up to something larger. It always did. Evelyn locked up the center that night, walked out into the warm summer evening where Lucien waited by the car, and felt something she'd spent years believing was impossible. Complete. Not because everything was perfect. It wasn't. There were still hard days, still moments when the past tried to drag her back, still times when she wondered if she was doing enough. But she was doing something, building something, being someone who mattered, not because of who she married or what she owned, but because she'd chosen to use what she had to help people who needed it. That was enough. More than enough. It was everything. "Ready?" Lucien asked, opening the car door. Evelyn took one last look at the center, lights off now, but ready to welcome more people tomorrow who needed to remember they weren't alone. "Yeah," she said, sliding into the passenger seat. "Let's go home." Home. Partnership, love, purpose, everything she'd thought she lost when her father died. Everything she'd found again when she stopped accepting survival as the best she deserved. The car pulled away from the center, heading toward the penthouse that had stopped being a cage and started being a sanctuary. And Evelyn Varela, formerly Evelyn Hart, formerly invisible, formerly victim, smiled. Because she'd won. Not the way she expected. Not the way stories usually ended. But she'd won anyway. And that made all the difference.